You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast, brought to you by focus-biz.com.
If you're looking for more money, time, and balance in your professional career, this episode is just for you. With us today is Andy Semotiuk. He is a U.S. and Canadian attorney with Pace Law Firm, but has had some incredible accomplishments through his career, including a UN correspondent and a Forbes contributor for over 10 years. We're so excited to chat with him. He's a great guy. Really excited to have you on. Andy, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. And I'm really happy to be with you here today as well.
Excellent. We were chatting and laughing a bit before coming on to record this episode. So really love who you are and what you've done, but we want to know more about your journey. What was it that you were doing, and kind of take me through where you are today?
Sure. Well, I was born in Canada, but I spent half my life in the United States, half in Canada. And basically, I was raised in Edmonton, Alberta, and I spent a lot of time in Los Angeles, California. Basically, two people were prominent in my life, my mother in Edmonton and my Aunt Helen in Los Angeles. I went to high school in Los Angeles, but the lower grades were in Edmonton. I took an interest in law because in my family previously, I had people, my forefathers, my grandfather and others were in the legal profession, but also because I helped my mother with various problems. So my father died when I was young, 9 years old. I helped my mother with things like statements that were coming in that she didn't understand for bills or whatever. She had to go to the bank or things of this nature. And because she was an immigrant from Ukraine, she needed help and I was helping. And it seemed like a natural thing to do for me. And as I grew older, I gained this interest in international affairs. And over time, I thought to myself, a lot of these international problems are solvable. All they need is a good lawyer who can study the law, figure out what is the legal issue here, sort it out, write a good legal opinion, and convince everybody that these problems, like the war in Ukraine today, for example, or Gaza, Israel, and what's going on over there. These are matters that can be sorted out very easily if someone just studies the law and tells everybody what is the law. And so that's the kind of idea I had going into law school. Well, things are a little more complicated than just figuring out what's the law to solve these major. I didn't take into account things like national interest, personal interest, emotions, history, and all these other factors. But I became a lawyer, and here I am. When I graduated from my law school at UBC in Vancouver, British Columbia, if you looked at my graduating class and you said, well, who among these people, like 50 years later or whatever, is still going to be a lawyer, I would have assured you that I'm not going to be the one, that I would just be there for a while and I'd go on. But here I am. I am one of the few that are still around practicing law. That's just the way it is, I guess.
That's an incredible journey. And thank you for stepping up to the plate, seeing a problem in the world and taking action to solve it and educate and communicate that to the world, because it is important. And again, the world will be a better place if, one, we communicate better. And there's people like you who want to solve problems out there. We appreciate that. And a big problem today is just the younger workers, or even millennials that are my age, who are in their professional career. There's never enough money, never enough time. And they're trying to find this balance between work. And I'm sure it's different for people in America, Canada, Europe, or across the world on how their standards are. But you've kind of dedicated your life to this. What is your advice? Take us through everything. Don't spare any detail. Take us through what it's like to save more money, time, and balance.
Okay, well, you've hit right on a theme that's in my book, The Unprofessional, which I wrote, especially for people coming into the professions, like engineering, law, medicine, whatever the profession might be. And I wrote the book because I helped over 10,000 people in the course of my career with various legal problems, especially young people. And I noticed these three themes usually. I would venture the bet that most people that are listening to this podcast are struggling at least with one out of these three, and maybe more than one of these three themes: money, time, and balance, as you point out. So let's talk a little bit about each one of those. Let's start with money. It's my observation that the key to making money is to provide the world something that it doesn't have right now. And a key to that is you got to ask yourself, what are you good at? What can you provide the world that the world is missing today? And more specifically, you got to ask yourself, what is your unique ability? And my belief is that every person has a unique ability. What I think is a God-given unique ability. And the key to life is to find your God-given unique ability and to put it into the service of others. That's what I think is a major purpose in life. Now, since it's your unique ability, it means that you're better at it than probably most other people. You may not be the best in the world, but you will certainly be one of the better ones and possibly best or one of the best in the world if you're focusing on your unique ability. Another way of putting this is, it was a secret that a friend of mine who was a physics professor, one of these professors at York University here in Toronto, who was in the physics department, nuclear physics. And I was talking to one, his name was Yuri. I said, Yuri, how can you work in this field? It's so complicated. Like, you got to be a genius just to work in the field. And he said, well, what I do is I focus on one area of physics, one little area, and I study it. And over the years, I've become an expert in this one area, and I'm known for my expertise. And people come to me because of my expertise, and this is how I've made a name for myself. And I thought, gee, this is an answer for anybody. If you take an area small enough that you can become an expert in it, I think there's not an area in the world that you can become an expert in and become possibly the most known person in the area if you don't study it, let's say, for 5 years. It's certainly true in law. If you pick a legal area and you studied it, and you study it for 5 years, believe me, you'll be one of the leading scholars in the area. So that's the way I think to make a goal. Now, luck has a role to play in this. You win the lottery, you're born to someone who's a wealthy person and passes the money on to you. You marry someone who's very wealthy. These are other factors that influence your life. But I'm talking about those normal people, ordinary people, who are trying to make a go of it in their life and what you can do. I believe that's the formula. So that's money. As far as time is concerned, a key in innovation, I believe, or a key insight into the area of how do you find more time in a busy day to do the things you need to do. The answer is organization, and the key thing is the 80-20 rule. Most people know about the 80-20 rule or have heard of it, but they don't know enough about the rule or don't apply it enough. And the 80-20 rule basically says that 80% of the results about anything you're trying to do are going to come from 20% of the factors you're putting into the equation. So, for example, in a club, 20% of the people will do 80% of the work. In an organization like a law firm or a business, 20% of the people will bring in 80% of the revenue. 20% of the people in Canada own 80% of all the wealth in Canada, and so on. Now, the numbers may not be exactly right. It might be 10 and 90. It's roughly. But the great breakthrough that I learned about this formula was from this guy, Jim Rohn, who is a very famous speaker in the United States. They called him the business philosopher in the United States. And he converted this idea into something more useful. He suggested that when you're looking at a problem and you want 80% of the answer, look for 4 or 5, maybe 6 things that are the key things to solving a problem. And any problem, no matter what it is, there are 4 or 5, maybe 6 things that are the key to solve. They'll give you 80% of the results you're looking for. And you can get into this in much, like I could talk about this for an hour, but this is the basic gist of how I look at the issue of time. Time is about organization and priorities. No priorities means trouble with time. You have to have priorities, and priorities are something that are based on values, and values are always subjective. So it means your priorities matter, not someone. If you don't have priorities, believe me, someone has priorities for you. So you got to figure out what are your priorities. So that's time. And then balance is another key concern for a lot of people. And in the area of balance, I look at it like this. You're either take your car and look at a tire. You're either a tire or you're a flat tire. A flat tire is a person without balance. Okay. And if we take that analogy, if you take a circle, imagine a pizza pie or just a pie, apple pie. You're going to divide up the pie into little chunks. So each one of those little triangles would be representative of your values, whatever values you have. Now, as to values, I cannot tell you what your values are. You cannot tell me what my values are because they're subjective by and large. However, there are a lot of values that people hold, relatively speaking, in common. So truth might be a value that most people would. Life, love, these are kinds of values that people hold in common. But the kind of values I'm talking about are things like, for example, health or spiritual values or entertainment or work or whatever, things like that. You have to go through your life and identify what are the values that are key to your life. In my life, the values such as these are important. One is diet, one is exercise, one is rest, one is family, one is entertainment, one is accomplishment. Let's say these might be the kind of things I'm talking about. Integrity might be one, honesty might be one, sincerity might be one, compassion might be one. Humility might be one. These are all the kind of things you might consider. Whatever these values that you consider, again, you can't include all values. You got to prioritize what are the key values for your life. And once you identify those, you put them into the pie as little sections of the pie. Now, the way this would work is like spokes that come out from a bicycle tire. Each spoke might be one of these values. And you can measure how well you're doing on a value by measuring from 1 to 10, 10 being the outer edge of the spoke, 1 being near the internal hub of the spoke, how well you're doing. So let's take one value. For example, nutrition. How am I doing on nutrition? Okay, I got a bit of a stomach here. Sometimes I have some ice cream and stuff like that. And I just had a little piece of chocolate today. So maybe instead of 10, I'm only at a 6 or 7, right? But for example, in the area of maybe work is a value. Okay, I work hard. I'm devoted. I'm sincere, honest in my job. And so maybe I'm a 9 when it comes to, you figure it out for yourself where you are on each of those spokes. And then what you do is you just put the points on the spoke and then just take a line and connect all the numbers around in a circle. And if you're a flat tire, you're out of balance, buddy. And if it's a circle, well, you're in balance and you're doing well.
I feel like most of our bicycles are going to look just like mountaintops, where it's like 6 to 7 and 0 and 1.
Yeah, they do. It's very hard to balance. Now, some people, for example, Van Gogh was a genius, and nobody painted like Van Gogh. So what he did is his life was out of balance because all he did was paint. Like his brother had to look after him and look after all his costs and everything because he was a disaster otherwise. You can compromise balance for a time period. For example, when I went to law school, I had to spend time studying law. And as a result, I was out of balance when it came to exercise and diet and sleeping and so on. for a while to achieve a great goal, so long as you understand it's for a while and eventually got to get back in balance. That's something you can do. But that's the way I see life in terms of these three factors.
That's so important. When we're making those short-term sacrifices, we're kind of looking at the end goal, the long-term gain. What are we trying to achieve? So it is okay to kind of be out of balance for a while, but as long as we return back to center, it's going to be that passion, that purpose that kind of pushes you through that finish line at the end of the day. And I love everything you shared from the money time, using your unique ability, and then the 80-20 rule. Many of us fail to realize our own unique ability. How can we find that if we're unsure? Because some people feel like it has to be like a specific skill. I guess for me, like I always felt my ability was communication, customer service, connection with people. So that could be applied to any different business that I pursue. I kind of feel like people kind of get stuck in the skill set portion of it. Are there any recommendations for how people can kind of find their own unique
Sure.
ability if they don't have one, or they feel that they don't have
Sure.
one?
Well, I'll share with you my own sort of journey in that regard, and it might be helpful. Just above my shoulder up here, and pointing at it, is a little plaque. It's a plaque from Toastmasters, which I belonged for many years, and I became a distinguished Toastmaster. Now, a Toastmasters is an organization that cultivates public speaking and leadership. And I belonged to Toastmasters for 35 years. And for 35 years, every week, I went to a club meeting where people spoke and then were fed feedback about your speech was good, but stop saying all the time. Keep eye contact with the audience. Don't go don't use the words you know your speech, etc.
You guilty.
And well, we're all guilty. And over time, I got better and better. Now, I thought that would be where my life would take me, is to be a speaker, public speaker, like a professional speaker. Well, I worked hard at it, but it didn't happen. Didn't happen for me as much as it should have or could have. And that was life telling me, no, this is not where we want you right now. So where did life want me? That's what I thought was my unique ability. It was in writing. Now, that's an odd choice for life to take for me, because when I went to university in the first year of English 101 at UBC, I barely made it. I got 50% on the final exam. And if my English professor today were to learn that I write for Forbes and I've been writing for 10 years and I published 5 books, he would roll over in his grave. And I myself did not think it was a unique ability. Now, over time, life told me, Andy, this is where we want you. This is what you need to write about. And in particular, on the subject of immigration. Indeed, actually, I became an expert on immigration, but it was not me who pushed me into writing about immigration. There's a guy named Sean Barry, who I work with, who kept saying to me, Andy, you're an expert on immigration. There are very few people who know as much about immigration as you do, U.S. and Canadian immigration. Write about that. And so I did. It's like I do this all the time. I know, start writing. So I wrote about it. And sure enough, for 10 years, I've been a Forbes editor, not editor, writer, contributor, write articles every month for Forbes. So that's an example of how life takes you to where you need to be. However, I find this work to be, for me, one of the highest things I can do in life. It uses my public speaking abilities and also my writing abilities and storytelling. You kind of signaled to me in what you said that this seems to be an area where you kind of click as well. Now, if it's for you or not, one of the ways is you will do it even if you don't get paid for doing it, which is what's happening, right? We're not really getting paid, but we're doing it.
And that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. We like it, right? Another aspect of it is when you do it, you find time flies by, and we're spending an hour together or whatever it is, and it'll be like 5 minutes. It'll seem to us like 5 minutes when we're come out of it. We say, oh, was that an hour? I can't believe it, right? And another way you'll know is you'll get goosebumps when you're doing it, or your hair may stand on its edge because you're enjoying it so much. And there's a thing called the Wallenda effect. And it's about Carl Wallenda, who was a world famous tightrope walker. And he walked on a tightrope and actually fell off a tightrope in San Juan, Puerto Rico, when he was walking across two high towers, I believe in the 19th. But before he died, journalists interviewed him and they said, "Why do you walk the tightrope?" And he answered this way. He said, "Everything in my life is either a prelude after I walk the tightrope. I only live when I'm walking the tightrope." And this Wallenda effect was also true, or you can find it among some of the top people in the world, people like Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player, where he loved playing hockey. So his whole life was organized around him being on the ice, but everybody else took all his other things and did them for him. So they packed him up, they moved his gear, they transported him to the new hockey arena. Everything was all organized. And his job was to play hockey. Elvis Presley, the singer, also spoke about this. He said that he only really lives when he's on the stage performing. It's called the zone sometimes in sports, or flow is another word for it. And that's all about being in your unique ability. That's how you know it.
Yes, there were some books I read that mentioned exactly that, the zone or the flow, where you're just doing what you love, you're really good at it, and time is flying by and you feel the most purposeful. And that's kind of that key to finding the money making opportunity, finding
Yeah.
that balance, and then within the time that you can now achieve, because wow, you're just enjoying it. You're like, work doesn't feel like work anymore. It's just fun, just like podcasting, like,
Yes.
and you enjoy too.
Yeah. Now, like I mentioned in my own life, the world out there had to steer me to where I need to go. And it steered me to this point here with you today. And
Is
I'm sure for others, it'll be the same kind of experience. Finding your unique ability by yourself is a mission impossible because you're too subjective. People have to also help you find your unique ability. That plaque I got up there, I never would have got it by myself. It was mission impossible. It was other success is never a one-person job. It's always someone behind that one person.
Absolutely. I always say that no one is ever truly self-made, because there's always people like they're backing you to kind of guide you and push you in that direction. And that was the same experience for me. This was 10 years ago. I was working and my boss's boss, she knew I played in a band, had equipment, and said, "Can you play music at my journey into DJing?" I was like, "This is fun. This is cool. It doesn't feel like work. I can make money from it." And suddenly it created this work-life balance. And I guess I could use my unique ability towards it. But isn't it crazy how those people kind of push us in that direction and lift us up when we need it? It's like life just kind of opens up these doors, and it's up to us to kind of look for them and walk through them when we're ready.
I'll share a experience about that myself too. I have a high school student working for me. Her name is Irina, and she's from Ukraine. She's perfectly fluent in 3 languages, Ukrainian, English, and Russian. And she's really a great worker here. 3 years ago, she was in high school, just living a normal life in Ukraine, and thinking that her life was all about living in Ukraine and going to university and having a great life, etc. And today she's here in Toronto with me, working in a law firm in English. How is that possible? What's going on here? It just, life came along and figured out what is going to happen to her, right? And because of the war and everything that's going on there, and the way that war is working is the women and children are out and the men are out on the front fighting. But they're doing their part and the women are doing their part, and so on in the West. But that's an example again of how life comes along and totally. Now, do you want it? Not always. Who wants to go through a war, right? Or a death, or a breakup, family, like a couple breakup or bankruptcy. But even that can be a learning experience or a growth experience if you look at it right. And if you look for what, you got to ask yourself, what are you trying to teach me here? What is it I'm missing? I'm missing something.
Yes.
Let me take it easy on me. Tell me what is it I have to do.
It does, yeah. Even for us business owners, entrepreneurs, we fail 9 times out of 10, but it's the one
Yeah.
idea we finally get right that finally clicks, and that's the same for many professional career people and just throughout life. Things will be thrown our way, and we just have to overcome those and kind of find diamond or the sunlight at the end, and eventually we
Yeah.
will get there.
Yeah. And hard work is part of the game, right?
Yes,
It's that
absolutely.
I don't think, say, for example, the president of General Motors just sort of let life happen to him and he just wandered around. Whatever comes my way, I'll take it. And I'm now the president of General Motors. No, it didn't work like
It's
that.
very yes, you have to take some action
Yeah.
and pursue the opportunities that come your way, but you have to work hard and do your research and kind of find your way and ask people about it. And more often, you're going to find people like you, Andy, who are willing to share and mentor and teach people and point them towards resources to get them further in life. Isn't that great?
Yeah. I look at today's younger people coming out of university, and it's been hard last few years with the COVID. It's been a real hardship. It was extraordinary hardship. And even now, the world is facing some big challenges. Climate change, the election in the United States is an example. These wars that are happening that are awful, just awful. But in my case, I have a great faith in humanity. And I believe if we are called together and we need to, we can rise to the occasion. We either rise to the occasion or we're finished. I think there's a way that we can come up with some solutions to some of these big challenges, but we got to work together. Just in that regard, philosophy that I believe helps is the one that I talked about when I talked about, say, people like Elvis Presley or Wayne Gretzky and so on. If you're in your unique ability and you can surround people with unique abilities that match yours, you have this sort of mastermind kind of a scenario where everybody's in their top ability working together. It's sort of like 2 people can do more than two people's worth of work. And it's provable, like they have these horse and carry, experiments where it's provable that a few horses drawing together a carriage together can pull more than their weight. One horse pulling can only carry his own weight. And it's a synergy, the synergy of working with others that's at play there.
Yes,
So that's
absolutely.
something to bear in mind. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Life is
I
all about teamwork.
Yes, and just as many people have been so gracious to educate and teach me, I've tried to pay it forward as well and motivate and teach others as well, and just share this collective knowledge with each other because we are stronger together. And I love that the horse and carriage or carry analogy there because it really highlights, yes, we are stronger together. We can accomplish more when we work together. Considering all of the craziness of the world and the problems that we have, what can we work towards to solve this? Is it a communication issue? What can we do?
Well, I'll give you an answer. It's sort of addressing what you're asking, but it's sort of a little bit off what you might expect. And I think one of the key things is motivation, the area of motivation. How do you motivate people to rise to the occasion, to be the best that they can be? Not everybody's hungry and ready to go all the time. You have to motivate them. And I learned all about motivation again through, and in particular, from a guy named Bob Richards, who was a Golden Gavel winner. And each year, Toastmasters used to give out the Golden Gavel to one person that they identified as a great speaker. And they would have a banquet and he would come and talk about their life and what they've learned, etc. I didn't see Bob Richards, but I heard his speech. I heard it on audio cassette tapes back then. And I was very impressed by it. And he talked about motivation. So here's what he talked about. And he said, we're going to have much longer than a 1-hour speech here, but presentation, but you'll have to deal with it. He said when he was growing up, he lived in a small town and they had a baseball team there. And there was a guy on his baseball team named Lou Boudreau, who was later, I think, got into the National League, and I think he played for St. Louis Cardinals, I think, at second base or something like that. But back then he was playing in the semi-professional league in this town. And Richards, who was a kid, he idolized Lou Boudreau. And he one day went to the park and he was in the far bleachers and Lou Boudreau hit a home run and Richards caught the ball. It was such a thrill. So he took the ball and he went to the players' locker room and waited outside for the players to come out, waiting for Lou Boudreau to come out. And there was all these kids lined up too. He went down the line talking to each kid. And he came to Richards and he said to Richards, "Oh, what's your name?" And he said, Bobby Richards. "Oh, and what do you want to be when you grow up?" "I'd like to be a famous baseball player." And Boudreau said, "Oh, Bobby, I can see you're going to be great one day. You're going to be really great." And he signed the baseball. And Richards talked about that moment. And he was so moved that someone that he honored so highly would see that he could be great one day. That was such an inspiration to him. And we all need that kind of inspiration for people to recognize us. And later, Richards talked about motivation more clearly. And he said back then they were in the economic doldrums in the United States. Things were not very good economically when he was talking. And he said the newspapers were looking for what is the solution to our economic malaise. And they interviewed economists, and 3 economists all answered that the problem was motivation. People needed motivation. And then he went on to describe what is motivation. And this was the description he gave. He said, motivation is painting a larger picture of the life of a person than the picture they have for themselves. And the moment of motivation is when that person seizes that larger picture and decides to go for it. And to me, that's the answer there. Like we might need a bigger picture of the life that we're leading than we have, a clearer picture of the kind of people we can be in, the kind of society we can live in than the current picture we have.
That's incredibly powerful. That's impactful.
Yeah, I would say that's it.
That is a great answer. Just knowing that motivation, it really comes down to that. Are people motivated enough to rise to the occasion as you described? That's incredible. Andy, like you mentioned, we're going a little bit past time, but that's okay. I wanted to allow our audience to know where they can find you online.
Well, as I mentioned, Pace Law Firm is where I work in Toronto. So Pace Law Firm, I work in the field of immigration. They can contact me there. And my books are online. If they just search my name, Andy Semotiuk, they'll find them. On Amazon, all of the books are on Amazon, including an audiobook about one of the books I've written.
Very excellent. We will have links available down in the show notes and the description so they can get direct access to you and all the links where they can connect with you online. A very related but off-topic question. Since you are the immigration expert, what we've seen in the past, 4, 8, 12, 16 years, is it any different than any other time in history? What does the law say on immigration and what's going on? What should we be doing?
Well, that's a big topic. We could do a whole podcast.
I should save it for another one.
Yeah. But let me say, it's been around with us all along, right? It's a little different now than before. The numbers have changed. The number of people who are trying to immigrate. The challenges are a little harder, but the basics are the same. People want to improve their lives through immigration. So that's my job. My job is helping clients improve their lives through immigration. And the motivational part is, can they see themselves in a larger picture of their life than the one they have? And if they seize it, then they work with a guy like me and I help them achieve it.
I love that. Andy, you're incredible, man. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate you coming to share this. Any last words of wisdom or parting advice you'd like to share with our audience here? Everything has been incredible thus far.
Sure. I'll give you one last piece of advice. 4 rules to live by. This is simple. It comes from a guy named Dan Sullivan. I've adopted his philosophy a little bit and just changed it a little bit for the way I like to think of it. First rule, do what you promise. Second rule, come on time. Third rule, finish what you start. Final rule, mean what you say. Meaning, the last rule requires a little bit of explanation. It's don't be sarcastic or ironic. Let your words mean something, like make your words mean something. And those are rules, very simple rules, very hard to live by.
I love all of those rules. I love all of those rules. Is the sarcasm just a little bit at the time?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sarcastic, jokingly sarcastic,
Of course, right.
but not
I-
destructively sarcastic.
Right. Sometimes I feel like my sarcasm could be my unique ability, but I don't want to push it. I'll stick with what I know. Andy,
That's
we
great.
appreciate you coming on. Really excited to publish this episode for you. And hopefully we can have you on for a part 2 and cover the many other important topics that you have to share. We appreciate it, Andy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, too.